Jessica Thompson's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. She was exhausted, still in her nurse scrubs after a brutal double shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. The number flashing on her screen was unfamiliar, but something in her gut told her to answer. What she was about to hear would shatter 28 years of family lies in less than 3 minutes. The voice on the other end was professional, almost cheerful. "Good evening. This is Marcus from Rosewood Gardens. I'm calling to confirm your final payment for the engagement party this Saturday. We have everything prepared as requested. The champagne fountain, the live orchestra, the imported roses. Truly spectacular. I just need to verify the remaining balance of $45,000 will be processed tomorrow as agreed." Jessica's blood turned to ice. Her hands started shaking so violently she almost dropped her phone. She wasn't engaged. She wasn't planning any party. She hadn't been to Rosewood Gardens in her entire life. But she knew exactly who was. Her twin sister Madison had been posting engagement photos for weeks, flashing a diamond ring that cost more than Jessica's annual salary, planning what she called the event of the season in Boston's most exclusive venue. And somehow, impossibly, Jessica's name was on the bill. Before we continue with this shocking story, if you believe that family should mean loyalty and honesty, not betrayal and manipulation, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell because the stories we share here remind us that sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the deepest, but they can also teach us our greatest lessons about strength and self-worth. Now let's find out exactly how deep this betrayal goes. Jessica's voice barely worked when she finally managed to speak. "I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. I didn't book any party at your venue." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably before Marcus responded, his tone shifting from cheerful to concerned. "Miss Thompson, we have your credit card information on file, your signature on the contract, and your email correspondence regarding every detail of this event. The reservation was made 4 months ago for Madison Thompson's engagement celebration to Christopher Bennett. You're listed as both the event organizer and the financial guarantor." The world tilted sideways. Christopher Bennett. That name was a knife straight through Jessica's heart. Christopher had been her boyfriend 3 years ago, the man she'd planned to marry, until he mysteriously broke up with her one night claiming he needed space to figure out his life. 2 months later, she saw him at a family dinner, sitting next to Madison, holding her hand, acting as if Jessica had never existed. Jessica's mind raced back through the past 4 months, searching for clues she'd missed. She remembered Madison asking to borrow her laptop repeatedly, claiming hers was broken. She remembered her sister requesting Jessica's email password just to check something really quick. She remembered finding unfamiliar credit card statements in her mailbox that she'd assumed were sent to the wrong address. Every piece suddenly clicked into a horrifying picture of calculated theft and betrayal. "Can you send me copies of everything?" Jessica asked. Her voice steady now, cold with a clarity that comes from pure rage. "The contract, the emails, all of it. Right now." Marcus agreed, sensing something was very wrong. While waiting for the email, Jessica opened her banking app with trembling fingers. Her savings account, which should have had $38,000 from years of careful saving, showed a balance of $4,200, multiple charges to Rosewood Gardens, each one approved with her credit card, each one she never authorized. The email arrived. There was her forged signature on a contract dated 4 months ago. There were dozens of emails from an account that looked exactly like hers, but with one letter different. A fake account Madison had created to impersonate her. The messages discussed every detail of an extravagant party, custom cocktails named after the couple's love story, a 12-tier cake covered in edible gold leaf, designer party favors for 200 guests, all purchased with Jessica's stolen money. But the email that made Jessica's heart actually stop was buried in the middle of the thread. It was from Madison's real account, sent to Marcus 3 weeks ago. "Please make sure my sister Jessica is not added to the guest list under any circumstances. This is my special day, and I don't want her there. She can remain useful by paying for it, though, since that's basically all she's good for anyway. She'll never even notice the charges. She's too busy playing hero at her little hospital job to pay attention to her finances. Jessica read those words 5 times, each time feeling another piece of her heart crumble. Too busy playing hero. Her little hospital job. All she's good for. These weren't just cruel words. They were a window into how Madison truly saw her. How her family truly saw her. Jessica had spent her entire life being the responsible one. The one who helped everyone. The one who never asked for anything in return. She'd paid for Madison's college textbooks when their parents claimed money was tight. She'd covered rent for their mother when she was between jobs. She'd even helped pay for their father's medical bills last year. And this was how they repaid her. By stealing from her, excluding her, mocking her. Jessica's phone buzzed again. A text from her mother. "Hope you're not too upset about not being invited to Madison's party. You understand she wanted to keep it intimate. Family only. You're always working anyway. You wouldn't have had time to come. Family only." Jessica wasn't even considered family anymore. If this story is making your blood boil, if you've ever felt used by the people who should love you most, leave the word betrayed in the comments below. And please, subscribe to this channel because what happens next will show you that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's simply refusing to be a victim anymore. Jessica didn't sleep that night. Instead, she did what she should have done years ago. She investigated. She pulled every bank statement from the past 5 years. Every credit report. Every financial document she could find. And what she discovered made the stolen $45,000 look like just the tip of an iceberg that had been sinking her life for nearly a decade. 3 years ago, when Jessica was up for a promotion to senior nurse at the hospital, the position went to someone less qualified. She'd been confused but accepted it gracefully. Now, looking through her old emails, she found messages she'd never seen before, sent from that fake email account Madison had created. Messages to Jessica's supervisor claiming Jessica was looking for jobs at competing hospitals, that she wasn't committed to the position, that she had personal issues affecting her work performance. Madison had sabotaged her career advancement. 2 years ago, Jessica had been saving for a down payment on a small apartment in Cambridge. She'd had almost $60,000 set aside. Then her father had a medical emergency and needed $30,000 for treatment. Jessica gave it without hesitation. But now, checking the hospital records she could access through her employee portal, there was no record of any treatment for her father during that time. The medical emergency had been a lie. Her father had been perfectly healthy. They'd taken her money and used it to fund Madison's luxury vacation to the French Riviera, the photos of which Jessica remembered seeing all over social media. The pattern was everywhere once she knew to look for it. Every time Jessica got close to achieving something, something convenient happened to drain her resources or derail her plans. When she was accepted into a prestigious nursing program at Johns Hopkins, suddenly her mother needed expensive dental work that wasn't covered by insurance. When she started dating Christopher, Madison suddenly developed an intense interest in him, showing up at all their dates, calling him constantly for advice about problems that never seemed to exist. Jessica found old text messages between Madison and Christopher that Madison had accidentally sent from Jessica's laptop years ago, messages she'd deleted from Jessica's phone but never from the cloud backup. Messages where Madison told Christopher that Jessica was emotionally unstable, that she was obsessed with him in an unhealthy way, that she'd been talking about marriage after only 2 months of dating, and it was creeping everyone out. None of it was true. But Christopher had believed Madison because, after all, she was Jessica's twin sister. Why would she lie about her own family? The manipulation ran deeper than money. Madison had systematically destroyed every opportunity for happiness Jessica had built, all while maintaining a perfect facade of sisterly love in public. At family gatherings, Madison would hug Jessica, post photos with captions about "my amazing twin," give speeches about how close they were. But behind closed doors, she was erasing Jessica from her own life, stealing her resources, sabotaging her relationships, ensuring that Jessica would always remain the struggling, helpful sister, while Madison shined as the successful, beloved daughter. Jessica discovered something else in her investigation. A group text thread between Madison, their mother, and their father from 6 months ago. Madison had written, "Jessica's been asking too many questions about money lately. We need to create another emergency to keep her distracted and broke. If she ever gets financially stable, she might actually leave us, and we can't afford that. Who else would pay for everything?" Their mother had responded with a laughing emoji and the message, "Don't worry, I'll come up with something. Your father's imaginary back problems worked last time." Their father had added, "Maybe we should feel guilty, but honestly, Jessica is so naive and eager to please, it's almost too easy. She'll never stand up for herself. She's too scared of losing family." They had turned exploiting Jessica into a game, a running joke between the three of them. They'd discussed her like she was an ATM, not a daughter, not a sister. And they'd been confident she would never discover the truth because Jessica Thompson was too kind, too forgiving, too desperately hungry for their approval to ever question their motives. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd gotten too comfortable, too arrogant. And when Marcus from Rosewood Gardens made that phone call, their entire house of cards began to collapse. Jessica sat at her tiny kitchen table in her modest apartment, the same apartment she'd been living in for 8 years, because she could never save enough to move somewhere better. She looked around at the secondhand furniture, the outdated appliances, the walls that needed painting. She'd been living like this while funding her family's luxury lifestyle. Madison lived in a penthouse condo in Back Bay that Jessica had helped finance without even knowing it. Their parents drove a Mercedes that Jessica's medical emergency money had actually purchased. Christopher was wearing a Rolex that Jessica's stolen savings had bought for their 1-month anniversary. And Jessica had nothing except the crushing weight of a lifetime of manipulation. But something had changed in Jessica during that long, sleepless night. The old Jessica would have cried, would have called her mother seeking comfort, would have somehow convinced herself that this was all a misunderstanding. The new Jessica, the one born in the moment Marcus said her name, was done being the family's silent sacrifice. She wasn't angry anymore. She was coldly, precisely determined to make sure they faced consequences for every single thing they'd stolen from her. By Thursday morning, Jessica had a plan. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice, about reclaiming her life, about making absolutely certain that Madison's perfect engagement party became the moment when every lie came crashing down in the most public way possible. Jessica had spent 28 years being invisible, being useful, being the sister who could be exploited without consequence. Saturday night, everyone was going to see her clearly for the first time. Now I know what you're thinking. What could Jessica possibly do that would make a difference? How could one person stand up against an entire family that spent years manipulating her? Well, let me tell you, what comes next is going to show you that the quiet ones, the ones everyone underestimates, those are the people you should never, ever cross. Subscribe to this channel right now, because you're not going to believe how this plays out. Jessica spent Thursday collecting evidence. She printed every forged document, every falsified email, every bank statement showing unauthorized charges. She compiled the text messages between her family members discussing how to exploit her. She created a detailed timeline of every manipulation, every lie, every dollar stolen. Then she did something she'd never done before. She hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in financial fraud and family law. Patricia listened to Jessica's story with an expression that shifted from professional interest to genuine outrage. What they've done to you is criminal fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. We're not talking about a civil disagreement here. This is prosecutable. She spread the documents across her desk. The forged signature alone could get Madison arrested, but combined with the systematic financial abuse and the evidence that your parents were complicit, this is a RICO case waiting to happen. Jessica had never thought of herself as someone who would take legal action against her own family. But as Patricia laid out the options, Something became crystal clear. If she didn't stop them now, they would continue this pattern forever. They would find new ways to exploit her, new emergencies to invent, new guilt to manufacture. The cycle would never end unless Jessica ended it herself. "I want to do this properly," Jessica said, her voice steady. "I want every dollar returned. I want formal charges filed. And I want it all to happen at the engagement party, in front of everyone who thinks Madison is perfect and I'm just the forgettable twin." Patricia smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd seen too many people like Madison get away with too much for too long. "Then let's give them a party they'll never forget." Friday was spent in preparation. Patricia filed emergency court orders to freeze all of Jessica's credit cards and bank accounts, preventing any additional unauthorized charges. She prepared legal documents for criminal charges against Madison for fraud and identity theft. She contacted Rosewood Gardens to inform them that the event contract was obtained through fraud, and that the venue could be held liable if they proceeded without investigating. Marcus, the manager, was horrified to learn what had happened, and immediately agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. But here was the beautiful part. Patricia advised Jessica not to cancel the party. "Let them have their celebration," she said. "Let them think they've gotten away with it one more time. And then, right at the peak of their happiness, when all 200 guests are watching, when Madison is giving her speeches about love and family, that's when we serve the papers. That's when the police arrive. That's when everyone learns the truth." Jessica also did something else that Friday. She called Christopher. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Jessica? Is everything okay?" They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since the breakup that had devastated her. "I need to see you before the party tomorrow," Jessica said. "There's something you need to know about Madison, about what really happened between us, about who you're actually marrying." They met at a coffee shop in Harvard Square, neutral territory. Christopher looked older, tired in a way he never had when they were together. Jessica laid out everything: the fake emails Madison had sent from Jessica's account, the lies she'd told to drive them apart, the systematic manipulation that had destroyed their relationship. She showed him the messages where Madison bragged about stealing him away, about how easy it had been to make him distrust Jessica. Christopher's face went pale as he read through the documents. His hand shook slightly. "She told me you were unstable," he whispered. "She said you were saying crazy things about her, that you were jealous of her success, that you needed space and I should respect that by staying away." He looked up at Jessica with eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "I believed her because she's your sister. I thought she was protecting you, protecting us. I never imagined." "She's not who you think she is," Jessica said quietly. "And tomorrow night, at the party that I unknowingly paid for, at the venue that she booked using my stolen identity, everyone is going to find out the truth. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know before it all comes out publicly. What you do with this information is your choice." Christopher sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "I need to think." Jessica nodded and stood to leave. As she reached the door, he called out, "Jessica, I'm sorry. For everything." She turned back to look at the man she'd once loved, the man who'd believed her sister's lies so easily. "I'm sorry too," she said. "Sorry that neither of us saw who she really was until it was almost too late." Saturday evening arrived with the kind of perfect weather that Madison would later claim was destiny blessing her special day. Jessica stood outside Rosewood Gardens at 7 p.m., watching luxury cars arrive one after another. Women in designer gowns and men in expensive suits stepped out, heading into the venue where champagne was already flowing, and the orchestra Madison had selected was playing classical arrangements of love songs. Jessica wasn't wearing a ball gown. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, professional and dignified. Patricia Chen stood beside her, along with 2 plainclothes police detectives, and a courier holding a sealed envelope of legal documents. "You're sure about this?" Patricia asked. Jessica watched her mother step out of a town car, wearing a dress that cost more than 3 months of Jessica's rent. Madison followed, absolutely radiant in a white cocktail dress, laughing at something their father said. Christopher was there too, looking uncomfortable in a way that only Jessica seemed to notice. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Jessica answered. The plan was simple. Let the party proceed for exactly 1 hour. Let Madison give her welcome speech thanking everyone for coming. Let her toast to love and family and new beginnings. Let her feel absolutely secure in her web of lies. And then Jessica would walk in, uninvited but undeniable. And the truth would finally have its moment. Inside the venue, Madison was living her fantasy. The ballroom at Rosewood Gardens was transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Ice sculptures, thousands of roses in shades of blush and cream, tables draped in silk with centerpieces that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The champagne fountain that Jessica's stolen money had paid for sparkled under crystal chandeliers. Every detail was perfect because Madison had spared no expense, just as long as someone else was paying for it. At 7:45, Madison clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. The orchestra stopped playing. 200 guests turned to face her as she stood on a small stage with Christopher beside her, both of them backlit by carefully positioned spotlights. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Madison began, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness she used in public. "Christopher and I are so blessed to be surrounded by such amazing people, by family and friends who support our love story." She went on, spinning a narrative about fate and destiny, about how she and Christopher had been meant for each other from their very first meeting. She talked about family values, about loyalty, about building a future on a foundation of trust and honesty. Several guests wiped away tears. Their mother was crying openly, proud of her perfect daughter. Their father beamed like Madison had just won the Nobel Prize for being wonderful. "And I especially want to thank my parents," Madison continued, "for always believing in me, for supporting me through everything, for showing me what real love looks like." She paused dramatically. "The only sadness I feel tonight is that my dear sister Jessica couldn't be here. She's always so busy with her work, so dedicated to helping others that she sometimes forgets to take care of herself. But I know she's with us in spirit." That was the moment Jessica walked through the ballroom doors. The orchestra had just begun playing again. Guests were returning to their conversations, basking in the glow of Madison's perfect speech. No one noticed at first when Jessica entered, flanked by Patricia, the 2 detectives, and Marcus, the venue manager. But as she walked calmly toward the center of the room, conversations began to die. Heads turned. People started to whisper. Madison saw her first. The color drained from her face so fast she actually swayed on her feet. Their mother gasped audibly. Their father's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. Christopher's expression was unreadable, but his eyes never left Jessica's face. Jessica stopped in the center of the ballroom, where everyone could see her clearly. She didn't rush. She didn't yell. She simply stood there, radiating a quiet strength that made the entire room fall silent. Madison found her voice first, that fake sweetness now tinged with panic. "Jessica, what a surprise. I thought you were working tonight." "Did you?" Jessica asked, her voice carrying perfectly in the silent room. "Or did you think I was too stupid to notice that you've been stealing from me for years? Too obedient to question why I wasn't invited to a party that I paid $45,000 for?" The gasps from the crowd were like a wave breaking. Madison's face went from pale to red. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're clearly having some kind of episode." She turned to the guests, forcing a concerned laugh. "I'm so sorry, everyone. My sister has been under a lot of stress lately. She's not herself." But Jessica wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone and connected it to the venue's sound system, something she'd arranged earlier with Marcus. Let me clear up the confusion. I'm going to play a recording for everyone here. Madison, you might recognize it. It's a text thread between you, Mom, and Dad from 6 months ago. She pressed play. The voices rang out through the expensive sound system with perfect clarity. Madison's voice, captured in a voice memo she'd sent with the text saying, "Jessica's been asking too many questions about money lately. We need to create another emergency to keep her distracted and broke." Their mother's response, "Don't worry, I'll come up with something." Their father, "Jessica is so naive, it's almost too easy. She'll never stand up for herself." The ballroom erupted. People were shouting questions, pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Madison tried to speak, but nothing came out. Their mother stood frozen, her carefully applied makeup running with tears that were no longer joyful. Their father looked like he might be sick. Christopher stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury directed at Madison. "Is this true? You've been stealing from your sister? You lied to me about everything?" Before Madison could answer, Patricia Chen stepped forward with her briefcase. "Madison Thompson, I'm Patricia Chen, Jessica's attorney. I'm here to inform you that you're being served with civil suit for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement totaling $147,000 over the past 5 years. Additionally, these 2 gentlemen are Detectives Morrison and Chen from the Boston Police Department, and they have a warrant for your arrest." The detectives moved forward with handcuffs. Madison started screaming, actually screaming, all pretense of sweetness gone. "You can't do this. Jessica, please. We're family. I'm your sister. Tell them this is all a mistake." Jessica looked at the woman who shared her DNA but had never shared her values. "You're right about one thing, Madison. This is about family. And you taught me a valuable lesson tonight. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect, honesty, and love. You gave me none of those things. So no, you're not my family anymore. You're just someone who stole from me and is finally facing consequences." The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as you'd expect when someone gets arrested at their own engagement party. Guests flooded toward the exits, recording everything on their phones. The video went viral within hours. Madison Thompson, Boston socialite, arrested for fraud at her own engagement. The hashtag Damasir Rosewood Gardens drama trended on Twitter for 3 days. News outlets picked up the story. Jessica's face appeared on the local news, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd stood up for herself against impossible odds. Christopher broke off the engagement that night, publicly announcing that he'd been deceived by Madison, and owed Jessica an apology that could never fully repair what he'd helped destroy. He didn't ask Jessica for another chance. He knew better. But he did write her a letter, one she kept but never answered, where he took full responsibility for being so easily manipulated and for not trusting the woman he'd claimed to love. Madison was formally charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. Their parents were charged as accessories after Jessica's lawyer uncovered their direct involvement in several of the schemes. The trial took 8 months. During that time, Jessica received hundreds of messages from strangers who'd experienced similar family betrayal, people who found courage in her story to stand up for themselves. The court ruled in Jessica's favor on every count. Madison was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to repay Jessica every dollar she'd stolen, plus interest and damages. Their parents received probation and were ordered to repay their share of the theft. The judge made a statement during sentencing that Jessica would never forget. Family bonds do not grant immunity from consequences. Trust is earned, not owed, and Ms. Thompson has shown remarkable courage in holding her family accountable for years of exploitation. Jessica used the returned money to finally move into that apartment in Cambridge she'd been dreaming about. She enrolled in the Johns Hopkins program she'd been accepted to years ago, finally able to pursue advanced training without financial sabotage. She changed her phone number, her email, and blocked her entire family on every social platform. She didn't do it out of hatred. She did it out of self-preservation. 1 year after the engagement party disaster, Jessica met someone new. His name was Daniel, a pediatric surgeon at her hospital who'd heard about what happened and admired how she'd handled it. He was patient, kind, and most importantly, understood that trust had to be rebuilt carefully when it had been shattered so completely. They took things slowly, building something real on a foundation of genuine respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Jessica never reconciled with her family. Madison sent letters from prison, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, promising she'd changed. Jessica read the first one and threw the rest away unopened. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, some wounds too severe to heal. And that was okay. Jessica had learned that protecting yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. Cutting out toxicity isn't being heartless, it's being healthy. 2 years after the night that changed everything, Jessica stood in front of a mirror in her beautiful Cambridge apartment, getting ready for her own engagement party. But this one was different. This one had a guest list of people she'd chosen. People who'd proven their love through actions, not just words. She'd invited her closest friends from the hospital, her mentor from the nursing program, Patricia Chen, who'd become a dear friend, even Marcus from Rosewood Gardens, who'd helped expose the truth. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Jessica thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, that Jessica had been so desperate for family approval that she'd let herself be destroyed financially, emotionally, and mentally. She'd believed that sacrifice equaled love, that being useful meant being valued. She'd been wrong about all of it. The new Jessica understood something crucial. You can't pour from an empty cup. And setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you smart. She'd learned that real family, chosen family, the people who show up for you without expecting anything in return, those are the relationships worth protecting. Blood relatives who treat you like an ATM aren't family. They're just people who happen to share your genetics. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and smiling at their reflection. You look beautiful. You ready? Jessica smiled back, genuinely happy in a way she'd never been during all those years of trying to earn her biological family's love. I'm ready. The engagement party was intimate, joyful, and completely paid for by both of them equally, like partners should. There were no secrets, no lies, no manipulations. Just genuine celebration of two people who'd chosen each other freely. During her toast, Jessica said something that several guests later told her they'd never forget. They say blood is thicker than water, but the full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." It means the family we choose, the bonds we forge through loyalty and love, those are stronger than the family we're born into. I spent 28 years believing I owed everything to people who gave me nothing. Now I'm surrounded by people who owe me nothing but give me everything. And that's how I know I finally found my real family. 3 years later, Jessica heard through mutual acquaintances that Madison was out of prison and working a minimum wage job, living in a small studio apartment, still trying to rebuild her reputation. Their parents had divorced, each blaming the other for the scandal that had destroyed their social standing. Christopher had moved to California and married someone else. The perfect family that had exploited Jessica for so long had completely fallen apart once their source of funding and scapegoating was gone. Jessica felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but also no guilt. She'd simply stopped enabling them, stopped being their safety net, and they'd collapsed under the weight of their own corruption. That wasn't her fault. That was consequence, pure and simple. Now, standing in her life that she'd built entirely on her own terms, Jessica Thompson understood what freedom actually meant. It meant waking up without dread, spending money without wondering who would ask for it, building relationships without fear of betrayal. It meant knowing your worth wasn't determined by how useful you were to others, but by how well you treated yourself. And every time she thought about that phone call from Marcus, that moment when everything changed, Jessica felt grateful. Not for the pain, but for the clarity. Sometimes the worst betrayals become the best teachers. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most give us the greatest gift by showing us exactly who they are. And sometimes, getting excluded from the party is actually the best thing that could have happened, because it forces you to realize you never wanted to be there in the first place. So what would you do in Jessica's position? Would you forgive family after that level of betrayal? Or would you do exactly what she did and walk away forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that you deserve better than people who only value what you can give them, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We share stories here about real people facing impossible situations and finding the strength to choose themselves. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be anyone's victim ever again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.